everybody, welcome to our third workshop. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to get started on this workshop. I think you all are going to enjoy our guest speaker this evening. I think gonna learn a lot. Our topic of our workshop this evening is on the topic of how do I prepare for a professional interview. So you're going into the interview, maybe you've gone to career fairs, maybe your mentor has hooked you up and connected you with someone at their company. You know, maybe you've gotten some referrals somewhere else. Doesn't really matter. You are about to step into the interview. Maybe you've already had interviews before. This workshop is about how to think about interviews differently. We are bringing in guest speakers who are experts on this topic from around the world to give you insight and wisdom on how to make the most out of the professional interview. So this workshop is going to be about 45 minutes long with, and I encourage you to ask questions throughout the workshop. I'm going to ask you 3 questions during the workshop, which I'll have you answer. That's how you get credit for being here. You're now midway through the program so far. You should have already had your first conversation with your mentor. Hopefully you've already started setting up your second conversation with your mentor. If you have not, or you're struggling to get in touch with your mentor, please email support@ambition-in-motion.com. We need to take care of you so then you can get connected and make the most out of this program. So really, this program is all about how can you prepare for the first professional interview. Really, what you're selling your interviewer on is your ability, essentially your future potential opportunity. Essentially, you are selling them on your potential, because at the end of the day, people are not expecting you to come in and be the expert on XYZ topic. They are expecting you to be a willing learner and someone that's eager to gain knowledge and to be a better professional. If you can convey that, you will get the opportunity. But it will be competitive, especially in highly competitive industries. And I know that anybody that's in this program is more likely than not going into a career that's competitive. I mean, you would not have gotten a mentor had you not wanted to take your level, take your career, take your life to the next level. So with that said, I want to encourage you to keep your head up, keep applying, put yourself out there for more opportunities, and leverage the insight and knowledge that you're getting in these workshops to make yourself and to help you better prepare yourself for the interview. Now, before we get started into our main program, I want to ask you a quick question, and that question is, when it comes to the interview, how do you want people to feel about you? In other words, what feeling are you trying to convey about yourself when you are in an interview? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that, because I think if we are more intentional about how we want other people to feel about us in the interview, our likelihood of actually having that happen increases substantially. I mean, I've talked about in past workshops, strategy, story, state, which I will talk about in a moment, but this is a really big part of the story part. Like, what is the story that you're telling yourself? Now, I think sometimes we can interpret that as psyching ourselves up, getting ourselves confident, getting ourselves pumped for why we're going to be successful. And I think that's great. But I think if we could take it to another level, that being intentional about how we want other people to perceive us. So if we want them to perceive us as confident, or if we want them to perceive us as knowledgeable, or if we want them to perceive us as eager to learn and having potential, it could be a variety of things. But what I really want you to do is I really want you to identify feelings that you want other people to feel about you when you enter their world. Because you can be intentional about that. Your likelihood of having them actually feel that is much greater. But if you don't set the intention, you have no idea how they're going to feel about you. You've got really no control over it. But if you intentionally think to yourself, I want people to think of me as confident. Okay, what am I going to do that's going to convey convey confidence? Really, it's all about whatever that feeling you want to convey. Make sure that you are taking actions and being intentional about ensuring that other people view you that way, and that you come in trying to actively think about actions that you can take that will help other people perceive you in that light. So let's start under the next part of our workshop. Now, I've talked about this in the past before, and I've talked about this in previous workshops, but one of the big things that I always love to stress is the 3 keys to success in the program. There are 3 of them. That is your strategy, that is your story, that is your state. I bring it up every single time because it is that important. And the reason why it's important is because if we are not honing our strategy, honing our story, honing our state, we are not setting ourselves up for successful. If we let someone else drive our roadmap for us, we could end up in a location that we do not want to be. But if we are intentional about our story, if we're intentional about our strategy, if we're intentional about our state, we are much more likely to get to where we would like to go. It's kind of like the law of attraction. When we put it out there, and we put it out to more people, and we're more intentional about what we want to accomplish, and we're more intentional about how we are going to convey our bodies and ourselves to other people, the likelihood that it comes back to us is much greater. So I want to talk about state. State is the most important thing. Like physically, where are you at in your life, in your world? What is going on? I don't care how stressed you are. I don't care how mad you are. I don't care how dejected you are. I don't care of anything negative going on in your world. If you can get yourself into a state conducive for being successful, especially for the interview, you will be successful. I'm a big proponent of power poses. I'm a big proponent of screaming at the top of your lungs and dancing out. In fact, I'd like to do that with you right now. So for the next 30 seconds, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to stand up. I'd like you to shimmy it out. I'd like you to shake it out. I'd like you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just scream at the top of your lungs at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out. Let it loose. Let it go, because you've got nothing to lose. I don't care if it's a popularity contest. I don't care if you're in a library. I don't care if you're in a house. What do you have to lose? This is not a coolness effort here. It's about making an impact and preparing yourself physically for being successful. What is the price of success? Getting yourself into a state conducive for being successful. Maybe looking a little weird to some of your colleagues, coworkers, or peers, but what is that cost to you in the long run? Nothing. They're going to say, you know, hey, what were you doing? Why were you dancing? Why were you screaming at the top of your lungs? You say, hey, I'm getting myself in a state conducive for being successful. Maybe they've never heard about it before. Maybe they've never learned. You can educate them on this. So don't worry about how other people are perceiving you when you are going to get yourself into a state that's going to level up your game, especially when it comes to the interview. Now, you may not want to do this in the office of a business that you are about to interview in, but you could certainly do it in the bathroom, in a bathroom stall. Get yourself into a 2-minute power pose. Stand up like Superman or Superwoman, or put your arms out like as if you're a star. There's a lot of things that you can do to get yourself into a state conducive for being successful, but you should be doing something, because if you're not, you are letting the way that other people perceive you essentially come up to chance. And you don't want to chance it, especially for the opportunity of a lifetime. And you have no idea which opportunity is the opportunity of a lifetime. It may not be this job. It could be the next one. If you make a positive impression in an interview and you may not land that job, that interviewer could have really loved how you interviewed, and that person may not be at that company for forever, or they might be, and they might come up with a new job. They might reach out to you personally to have you come and interview. It's all about the relationship. It's all about how they perceive you. It's all about that impression you leave. Your state is critical. Now, what is the story you tell yourself for why you are going to be successful? This is something we kind of did earlier when I asked you, how do you want other people to feel about you in the interview? This is a great exercise to prepare yourself for a professional interview. If you are intentional about how you want other people to feel about you, you are going to put yourself into a position to succeed, because then you're much more likely to manifest that outcome. Literally, law of attraction, putting it out there. I want other people to feel XYZ about me. Confident, smart, intelligent, well prepared. I don't care what it is. Maybe it's a weakness that you have, but you like to have them perceive it as a strength. Maybe it's a strength that you have that you'd really like to amplify even as a greater strength. Doesn't matter, but set an intention of something. Because if you don't set an intention of something, it could be wild in terms of what they actually perceive of you. Now, the last key is your strategy. What are the things that you're going to do to make the most out of this interview? Are you going to come prepared with questions? Are you going to come prepared with doing background research on the company? Are you going to make an intentional, focused effort on taking notes during the conversation, so then you're asking poignant, direct questions to the interviewer that are relevant about his or her life? Are you going to do the things that you need to do to be the most successful in an interview, or are you not? So the strategies you're going to learn from our guest speaker later on in this workshop, I think you're going to really enjoy what our guest speaker has to say. But before we jump into our guest speaker, I want to talk about one final thing, and that is getting yourself into a routine that can help you prepare for an interview. One of the things that I like to do, have an accountability partner. This could be it could be anybody. But what you want to do with your accountability is you want to share with your accountability partner 3 things that you learned this week, and 1 thing that you've done to get closer to that internship or job. What this does, and you might think this sounds silly, you might think this sounds crazy, it could be another student in the program, it could be a friend of yours, does not matter. But what we've learned, what we've observed, is that students who land jobs and internships through this program are substantially more likely to actually land that job and internship if they told other people about their experience. One of the questions we ask at the end of the question is, on average, how many other people did you tell about your experience in the program? What we ended up learning was that when a student told 20 or more people about their experience in Ambition in Motion, their likelihood of also landing their job and internship was substantially higher than students who didn't. There's a direct correlation to you telling more people about your experience and what you're learning in this program. to actually landing the outcomes you like than not. So I want to challenge you to identify an accountability partner. Share with them 3 things that you've learned this week and 1 thing that you've done to help you get closer to landing that job or internship. Now, the other big thing that I want to bring up with you is our referral program. So we are now starting to open up the applications. And one, I'd love for you to be in part of the program again. You can get a new mentor, you're going to get new content, you're going to learn from new speakers. But more importantly, I want you to encourage other students to get involved as well. We have a referral program for you, so then you are discounted to get in the program next semester. Essentially, anytime that anybody applies, we ask them, how'd you hear about us? If they write in your name, you get credit. If you don't mind being an ambassador for this program, I'm helping encourage other students to get involved and take advantage of this. I would greatly appreciate it because it would help us make a bigger impact on more people, which is really what our goal is. So let's jump into our workshop. I'm so excited for you to meet our guest speaker. I'm so excited to transition into this next part of the workshop. Remember to answer the 3 questions that we asked during the workshop. That's how you get credit for being here within 24 hours of the workshop going live. If you got any questions, any concerns, any issues with anything at all, please email support@ambition-in-motion.com. We will answer those questions, concerns, and issues. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited for you to meet our guest speaker. Hey everybody, welcome to our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to dive into our topic of how to prepare for the interview, how to make the most for the interview, how to go through the whole interview process. I mean, we're in this crazy time. We got COVID, we got virtual interviews, we're meeting people virtually, we're networking virtually, we're doing everything virtually. Maybe we're even working virtually. Some companies aren't doing virtual work, some companies are doing hybrid, some companies are only in person. Either way, we need to do what we can to best put ourselves and set ourselves apart in the interview process. Now, fortunately, we've got a great guest with us here this evening. We have Lindsay McAteer. Lindsay is a self-motivated individual with strong communication and organizational skills. She surrounds herself with people and situations that she enjoys. She's determined and capable of organizing and accomplishing any task required. She's currently the Chief Operating Officer for Encore Sotheby's. Lindsay, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So I know I gave a brief overview and intro of you, but I would love if you could just maybe give us a little bit of background of you and how you got into your role today. And then I'd love to learn about, I just love to learn how you got into your role today and maybe some of the steps that you encountered along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in this role going on 13 years. So been here quite a while, but I stumbled into this actually through networking and through my contacts. So in college, I had some internships and kept in touch with those supervisors. Out of college, I fell into a role that I didn't love. I was there 2 years just to kind of gain experience, but didn't love it. So when I started looking elsewhere, I put feelers out to those supervisors I had at my internship, and actually one of them connected me to the owner of Encore Sotheby's and went through that interview process, and it was a match. So I've been here ever since.
Wow. So you were in your internships and you got into your first full-time role, and you just determined for whatever reason this first role was not the right fit for you. I guess what I'd be curious to know, because I bet a lot of students are genuinely interested, what about that first role was not a fit, and what made the role with Encore Sotheby's a better fit?
Sure. So with the first role, it was for a financial company and it was advertised as a marketing role. But when I got into it, the day-to-day, it was basically a call center, and I was answering some marketing questions, but it was not what I anticipated. But I did stick with it for a while. I didn't want a ton of turnover, and I figured there was something to learn from the role regardless. So I did stay there 2 years. But then when I started, and I think it was important staying there that period of time to learn exactly what I didn't like and what I was looking for. And so one of the things I wanted was something that wasn't so monotonous. I was sitting at a desk doing the same thing day over day. So that was important in a new role for me. Like, what does the day-to-day look like? Is every day the exact same? Because that wasn't appealing to me. Like, was I able to problem solve and kind of work on my own? Because I didn't love, at the previous role, I was very micromanaged and I didn't love that. So it helped me kind of know what I was not looking for. And so when I met with Mark Zuckerman, who's the owner of Encore Sotheby's, I was able to kind of ask those questions and get a feel for the company culture and what it was like there. And he was very laid back and, accommodating to my questions and things like that. And so it just felt like a better transition for me.
That's cool. That's interesting. I mean, I think one thing that comes to mind is as I'm hearing this story is that was probably a jarring experience for you. I mean, you probably came into that first role thinking like, okay, I'm like excited, like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, coming into marketing. I'm really excited about the jump in and about to really take the world by the horns, or I don't even know what that saying is, but and then you get into it and you're like, what am I doing here? Like, is this what marketing really is? Like, is this like, was there a disconnect? And now potentially I'm going to go into a role that's like not even in marketing. And I would imagine you've had a lot of questions to yourself. I think a lot of students, they become wed to their degree path where they think, oh, like direct linear path, I'm in marketing, therefore I have to pursue a career in marketing, or I'm in finance, I must be in finance, or I'm in engineering, I must be in engineering. And they neglect to realize that life can change and it's okay to have a variety of experiences. What helped you overcome that?
Great question. I think being in that position for so long, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse a bit, but I just didn't enjoy any aspect of it. And even though it fit like what my degree potentially was, I knew I didn't want to do that forever. And so, and again, not that I had to pick my forever job, but I just knew in the next path, it would pull on different skill set. It didn't necessarily have to fit into the box that my degree was in. It was more about, you spend most of your day at work. And so I wanted to be someplace and be doing something that I enjoyed, not necessarily what my diploma said that I should be doing.
That makes sense. And speaking of like looking for your next lifelong role, I mean, you've been at this role, I think you said for 13 years now.
Yep. Yeah.
That's a long time. That's a very long, I mean, in today's world, that's a very long time to be at one company. And all the students know about work orientation and how all that works. I know that for you, you were both career and calling oriented. How did the role start and how did the role evolve to allow you to both achieve growth and the growth that you're seeking from being career oriented, but also the impact from also being calling oriented? How did that evolve over time?
I think first and foremost, just open communication with my, Mark wasn't always my boss, but whoever was my manager at the time, just kind of what my goals were. And that I didn't even know what my path was, but I knew that I always wanted to be learning something. And so when the job would start to get monotonous for me, I would kind of take toll of what other people were doing and what was interesting to me and just ask like, hey, so I work in the real estate industry. Hey, can I shadow an agent for a day? Like, I just want to know what that's like. Can I learn more about the finance end of this? Can I, whatever was interesting me or that I had questions for at the moment, I would just ask. And fortunately for me, that was really embraced by my managers and kind of allowed me to pick my path within the company.
I think there's something really powerful in what you're saying, and that's the power of advocating for yourself. Like the fact that you were willing to ask, I think is so crucial and so critical because so often, and by the way, this isn't just students, this is all professionals. I see this all the time where people don't know how to advocate for themselves. They don't know how to ask, and they just assume that their boss knows what they want and they're just going to give it to them one day. Or they just assume that their boss is incapable of giving them what they want, and therefore they're better off moving to a different company, which is like the worst outcome you could possibly want both as a leader and for the employee, because you got to start over. No one wants to start over. So I think there's a lot of power in what you just said about the power of asking questions and asking for opportunities, because what's the worst that could happen? They say no.
Right. Absolutely.
So speaking of asking questions, let's talk about the interview process itself. I feel like asking questions is something that's really powerful that a student can take advantage of to help them identify what is the right fit for them within the roles that they're pursuing or interviewing for. I guess what I'd be curious to know is, are there go-to questions that you ask Mark or that you just ask when you were interviewing, or that you also admire when people ask you when you're interviewing them for roles?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, and again, this was on my previous experience, like understanding what the company culture is like what's a day to day like for that current role, whatever role you're interviewing for. Because for me, that was huge. As I mentioned before, you know, you spend most of your life really at your job. So understanding like the people you're working with, what's important to them, how the day is structured, how the company culture is, like that was very important to me. And so, you know, I pick up on that when people ask. But I also think when people ask, you know, what your first week or 2 weeks will look like, because I've also been in a situation where I had a great training to kind of set me up for success, and then one where I was just kind of set to figure it out. So I think understanding what the first couple weeks look like, that will help you get up and running, and maybe even specifically asking about training. But outside of that, like it impresses me when I can tell someone has done like a deep dive into the company. Like they know how long we've been around, they know what states or regions we're in, they know, you know, a little bit about the company, instead of feeling like maybe this is their sixth interview for the day and it's all kind of blending together. So just doing your homework on the company so you can ask, you know, intelligent questions at the end.
God, don't you love the question of like, hey, tell me a little bit about what you know about us, just so that I don't repeat anything, and they tell you something that's not even what your business is.
Right. Yep. Or deer in the headlights, and you're like, okay, great.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't do any research before this interview, but I hope that doesn't detract anything from our conversation together. You're like,
Right.
okay, well, contrary to that belief, it does detract from our conversation together. Let's take a hot day or two, and, you know, maybe we'll reconvene. I don't know. Click.
Sure.
So that's really interesting. I love the notion of doing that research ahead of time. Is there a way to go about doing that research and then conveying that you did that research and background info without sounding like a brown nose, or without sounding just like you, to not sound desperate, essentially, or to not sound like overly eager to share, like, I know that you were started in May 1st, 2009, and, you know, like you know, Poindexter over here just giving every statistic they could possibly recite because they memorized it in the car beforehand. Is there a way to, in a suave way, deliver that you did that research? Yeah, that's a question.
I think if you can think of a question around it and say something like, you know, I saw on your website that, and then you ask a question about the company, like you started in Carmel, Indiana. Like, when did you expand into Fort Wayne? That would be for us specifically. But if you can, you know, kind of deep dive into the website and reference it, that you read it, and then think of a question that proves that you read it. That way, you don't have to necessarily spout statistics, but something that makes me be like, okay, like you did a little bit of homework before this. That's great. Or even about the person individually. Like, you know, I see that you've been with the company 12 years, you know, what made you choose Encore, or something like that. So you can just throw in little facts that isn't so brown nosy, but proves that you kind of did your research ahead of time.
Yeah. One of my favorites is the, you know, for your example, would be like, I noticed that you expanded your headquarters to Fort Wayne, Indiana. How do you see that affecting the growth rate of Encore Sotheby's over the next few years? And how, or if at all, do you see that impacting this role that I'm applying for, as, you know, this role evolves and grows over time?
I think that's awesome.
Because the cool part about that way of framing that question is it doesn't necessarily insinuate that you're the person in the role as the interviewer, as the interviewee, but it does insinuate that you care about how the company's meta high level decisions are going to be impacting this role over time, and that you care about how it's going to affect you, and you're forward thinking. You're thinking about how you can fulfill positions moving forward. And I think that a lot of companies really appreciate that eagerness and drive to learn and grow and be better, I guess, in general.
Absolutely. And it makes you feel like, you know, maybe they want to be here longer than 6 months. You know, they have an interest of their growth trajectory, or because we've had a little bit lately, you know, turnover issues. So having someone who you feel like you're investing this time and energy in, they're going to be here, you know, ideally for the long haul, but, you know, longer than a year would be great.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that's actually a really great question that I'd love to learn your thoughts on. Like, what is a really effective way to answer that question? Because I think if we're students, like realistically, we're not going to spend our life at this company for the rest of our lives. But we probably are open to spending in the next 3 to 5 years at this company. Maybe a little less time, maybe a little more time, I don't know. But ideally, to your point, not the 6 to 12 month and then, you know, bounce to another spot. How can I go about, if someone were to say, if an interviewer were to ask a candidate, like, where do you see yourself in 3 years or something like that? Or where do you see yourself in that 5-year question? How can you answer that question in a way that conveys like, hey, I'm interested in working long-term for this company. I'm interested in growing, so I don't want to be stagnant in this role for the rest of my life. But at the same time, I'm not necessarily interested in bouncing around to any new spot. Is there any, have you ever experienced a candidate that gave a really great answer to that question?
Trying to think. I don't know that I've experienced it. Nothing stands out as like a great answer from a candidate, but I think something that proves you want to grow. Like, I think that's okay to say, like, you want to continue to learn things and hone your own skills and see growth within a company. And I think, you know, it's kind of company dependent, like depending on how your conversation went. Now, if they're saying there's no room for growth, that's going to be a difficult answer to say that you want to be there for the long haul. But I think kind of capitalizing on things that maybe you discussed previously in the conversation and stating what's important to you that you've already talked about, if any of this is making any sense. Like when you talked about that there's an opportunity for leadership, like that is something that appeals greatly to me. Like, I'd love to kind of hone in on my skills there. And so pulling from different things in the conversation that prove that you want to stay with that company based on your conversations that you've already had. But I don't think you have to point blank say, I want to be here for 5 years. You know, I think saying that, you know, our mindset, our visions are kind of matching up. And so I feel like this would be a great fit, and I'm excited to kind of learn more about the company and grow with it.
So what you're saying is that on the second interview, you don't have to come in with a tattoo of the company's logo on your bicep to show your allegiance.
I would prefer not, actually. Yeah, that would be maybe alarming in the other regard. But yes, that's what I'm saying.
That's so funny. I'm being silly. But yeah, I mean, the point is you don't have to come out and say, oh, I don't plan on leaving this company for the rest of my life. I can, you know, you can actually say, hey, you know, I'm interested in growth. I'm interested in learning new skills. And maybe even you as the candidate can almost convey to the interviewer as like, for the reasons you've shared with me, I see this being a great fit for me because this can allow me to grow at my own pace and get these things that I would like to have accomplished personally. Almost like show the interviewer that you're convinced that this role would be a right fit for you. I think is really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, you're in the interview process for sure, but you're also interviewing the company. I mean, you want it to be a good fit and you want it to be a good match for longevity. Otherwise, you'll end up in a situation like I was before, and you're, you know, not driving with the people and the work. And so you're there a much shorter time than if you feel that connection and if you genuinely do share that vision.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily, when I ask this question, I'm not necessarily saying it in a way to be two-faced, but let's say you're interviewing for multiple roles and in the back of your mind, you've got an informal, not direct informal, but a priority list or a list of what your top choices would be, but ultimately you'd be happy with any of them. How can you go about, I don't want to say saying keeping a straight face, but how can you go about responding in a way that makes that employer feel like they're your number one spot? Even in the back of your mind, you may know, you know, you've got a couple other options that might be a better fit for you. How do you suggest going about communicating that?
This is if you're presented an offer or if you're just,
or if you're just interviewing, like if like, I know this is an interesting question to ask you because you're coming from the standpoint of the hiring person, but as a student, as a candidate, they're probably going to be interviewing for multiple roles and multiple positions. And you're probably not going to get an offer if you're visibly conveying that this is the third choice on my list of choices, and it's very evident.
Yeah. Well, I think first, and this isn't really answering your question, but I think having an open mind, because I will tell you, when I started here 12, 13 years ago, I wasn't planning on being here 13 years. I just honestly, I did connect with Mark and like see the vision, but I also was not in a great situation and just wanted out. So I think, sometimes you don't know what's going to happen. So go into everything with an open mind. But in that scenario, if you have a couple situations where maybe you're ranking one higher than the other, but don't want to convey that, I think still just everything we've talked about, doing your homework and pulling on some items that make them feel like you did your research. So even if you're interviewing for other people, like you've done your homework on this company, like you're showing interest, I think is the biggest. Just showing interest, asking those pointed questions to show that you're interested in being there for the longer term.
Beyond doing the research, or is there any other prep work a student can do to communicate or just put themselves in the best position to be effective in an interview?
I think if possible, this I guess is specific on the individual, but reaching out to your sphere, like your contacts, like similarly to how I had some contacts from college, like, and I don't know that it will necessarily help. Well, first of all, I guess you never know who knows someone, but just to get their opinion on, do you know anything about, for my instance, like the real estate industry, or, just gaining a mentor's perspective or someone from your network, just to help there, or even ask like if they know any questions that they feel like you should be aware of, or, just gaining someone else's opinion, I think is important.
I love that. I mean, I think another thing can also be like writing out your questions in advance, like bringing in a notebook. I mean, if you got a professional notebook, awesome. A normal notebook could be fine too, but just bringing in some form of notes where you've got pre-laid out questions that you want to ask that interviewer. Because I think the last thing you want to do is when you get to the end of the interview and they say, hey, what questions they have for me? And you're like, I think we're all good. You're like, see you never. Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to be harsh about that, but the likelihood that you covered the full depth and breadth of every possible topic you could have wanted to talk about is very low. And it conveys that you're not really interested in the role itself if you have got no questions to ask the interviewer.
I agree 100% with you. Like it's always a red flag for me. I just feel like that's interviewing 101. Like come with some question, anything. But we have had instances where people are like, no, I think we're good. It's like, okay.
I don't think we are.
Good then.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's really interesting. So I guess I'd love to take a moment to ask the students a question real quick. What are go-to questions you like to ask in an interview, or that you would like to ask in an interviewer when you're in the interview process? One thing, Lindsay, I wanted to go back to you on was culture. How do you interview for culture fit? I mean, you mentioned that should be the most important thing that you look for when applying for a role or when interviewing for a role. But like, how do you know, like, I don't know, when we say culture, I'm thinking like, how do people interact with each other? How do people vibe with each other? Is this, like how strict are people? How lenient are people? I guess, how do you find the real answer to this out? Because I feel like if I'm a student and I'm gonna in an interview ask like, hey, like how's the culture here? Everyone's gonna tell me the most glowing like things. It'd be like as if somebody called my reference checks and said, nah, Garrett's a pretty crappy person. It's like, no, you're gonna put the best reference checks on your reference list, just like if you're a candidate asking questions. If you ask the interviewer about the culture, they're highly likely going to give a glowing review of the culture. How can you get a real honest, how do you filter through the BS? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it can be difficult. I think, aside from questions, which I can give some examples of questions, but I think it'll be important how the interviewer is treating the interview. Like if they're super rigid and, asking these really difficult questions and not a lot of personality there. I mean, I think that says a lot to me anyway, versus if they're, it can go the other way too. If they're like super laid back and they don't really ask you any questions, and, that says a lot as well. But I think asking things like, what does a day look like for that role, who understanding who that role reports to, like who else on the team does that person interact with on a daily basis. Do you guys have a work from home, situation? Do you do any sort of like team building activities, things like that, just to see if that is at least high on their radar, or what kind of team building activities they do, to see how committed they are to culture versus does everyone just kind of check in, check out each day, get their job function done, and go home.
Yeah. That's interesting. It makes me think. I'd love to learn students' perspective on this because we're in such a crazy, dynamic, changing atmosphere. Would you prefer to work from home, work in a hybrid environment, or work from the office? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn your thoughts on this because I think this is a topic that we see a lot of times playing out in the professional world. But as students, I don't know. I feel like a lot of professionals say, oh, I want to work from home. Like I've done this for long enough years. But I think for a lot of my assumption is that college students would say, perhaps a hybrid or in person because they want to meet people in the working world. They want to have those communications and those dialogues. And, it's still very new to them, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard to build relationships and over the screen. And to learn, just especially in the workplace, there are little side conversations that happen organically. It's not like you're trying to leave out someone who's working from home, but if there's a problem that needs to be solved right there and it's happening in front of you, you're not going to take time to be like, hey, are you available for a quick phone call? You just work it out with whomever's there. So I do think some hybrid is probably the ideal scenario, but I do think it's still important to have some sort of face-to-face personal interactions.
When I ask this question, I don't mean to like give away all the gates of, the keys to the gates, but when we're in different economies and we're in different economic times and situations, different things can fly. And by that, I just mean when you're in a market where it's really tight jobs, like not many jobs are out there, there's a lot of applicants. As a student or as any professional aspiring to pursue a role, you really got to be on your A game to impress. Right now, we're in the total opposite of that, where essentially if you came in breathing with some clothes on, you got the job. I'm joking, kind of. But what we're finding is that there's a great opportunity for a lot of young professionals, even students, to upskill themselves for roles and almost leapfrog opportunities because of how hot of a jobs market we're in. What can students do to take advantage of that, of this kind of unprecedented economic time that we're in right now?
I think it starts from the very beginning, like being simple things, being organized. Again, I hate to going back, but doing your homework, like from the cover letter, like for example, like when I receive that, or, sometimes if it's in a portal, whatever they've written in the like Indeed portal or wherever they're applying. But if they can do anything to kind of catch attention, because you're right. I mean, it is still very much, it is very much the job seekers kind of market, I guess, or they have the upper hand initially, but I'm still inundated with resumes, but it's filtering through like, what of those are real resumes and what are someone that's just like got some auto apply feature on. So I think it's not as hard as you think, like putting some time and effort into the cover letter, updating your resume with some keywords, or not taking anything for granted that you're doing at your current role or that you've done in college, or, putting everything on there that the skills could be transferable into a role, I think is important. Because you're right, like we're not always looking for someone who's had like a certain title. It's what skill set, like who's going to be the person who can come in and just get the job done, not who has X, Y, and Z on their resume, which can be hard to convey, I understand, and also hard to figure out in an interview. But I think transferable skills is something that I look for more than, oh, look, they were at this manager level or, whatever at another company.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up about the transferable skills and just what you need to be prepared for a role, because I think the Journal of Vocational Behaviors came out and they found that for men, if they had 40% of the pre-qualified qualifications for a role, they were just as likely to get the role as somebody who had 90% of the qualifications. And for women, it was 30%, meaning if they had 1/3 of the the qualifications for the role, they were just as likely to get the role as someone who had 90%. So I guess the point I'm making is it almost kind of validates what you're saying, is that if you're applying for a role and you look at it and you're like, I don't have all the qualifications, that's okay, because they're looking for your ability to show that you can get it done more often than they are that you've got this degree in XYZ field, or that you've got this credential in this area, or that you've got 3 years experience doing XYZ thing. If you've got something that's relevant or close to relevant, or that you think you've got the skills to do it, shoot, give it a shot. You got nothing to lose, and you might as well get an opportunity. I mean, that also statistic also points to a lot of the unconscious bias that exists in the country. I guess the point I'm saying is that if you're a young woman, go for it. Go for the big, crazy, hairy, audacious gold job that you didn't think was even close to possible, because you've got a decent shot at getting it, a lot higher of a shot than you think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Never sell yourself short. And you just don't know. I mean, this is to your point. You don't know exactly what they're looking for. You know, some of those, depending on the forum, when you set up a job post, like it requires you to select something. So maybe it's important on the site, but not necessarily to you. And you might weigh something else higher than the other. So yes, I agree with you. Don't sell yourself short. Just put yourself out there, and the worst can happen is you don't get a call back, but at least you tried.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you know what I also love even about your situation is, like, you started from the very bottom, and now you're, the chief operating officer. I think that's a really cool escalation, and how that kind of developed over time. We haven't really talked about this, and we don't have that much time, but I love, how did you escalate at Encore Sotheby's? Like, how did you go from the very bottom to COO?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think I was willing to do anything. I just was like, sure, I'll sort these files, like secretarial stuff it wasn't necessarily my job, but I saw that it was needing to be done. So I just jumped in to do it. So I think having an open mind about your role, we've had individuals who, follow what they applied for to a T, which is okay. But if you're willing to help a scenario that needs help, I think that shows you're a team player. So I did literally everything, partially for me, because I just wanted to experience every part of the business. But then also I just like to be busy, so filling my time. And then, as I kind of referenced before, just open communication. I was very honest about what I wanted to learn. And I think my vision kind of created over time. I didn't from the beginning set out to be like, I'm going to be the COO. I just wanted to learn all aspects of the business, whether I stayed here or not. I still wanted to learn that. I even took a little bit of a hiatus to be a full-time real estate agent, because I'm like, what's it like to buy and sell? It's important to learn that aspect as well. So I think mainly having an open mind, being willing to kind of jump in and do anything to expand your skill set.
Very cool. Awesome. And that makes me think of one last question I'd love to ask the students, and that is, what do you hope to get out of your first job or internship? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn, what do you want to get out of it? What learning experience do you want to have pulled away? Maybe it won't show on your resume in terms of something tangible that you accomplished or did, but something that you would love to learn, or learn how to do, or learn about from this first job or internship. Post it in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that. Lindsay, this has been great. This has been a really cool conversation around how to prepare for the interview, and just what you can do to set yourself apart through that interview process. Any final tips you have for our students as they go through this whole just application interview process?
A couple things. I think one huge key is don't sell yourself short, which we harped on, but always go for it and try and understand. I think I would get in my head in interviews sometimes, you're as much interviewing the company as they're interviewing you. It's got to be a good fit for all. So yeah, just go out there and try and don't sell yourself short, and that's it.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, this has been great. Lindsay, last question for you. How can our students learn more about you? Are you okay with them connecting with you on LinkedIn?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. Yep, I'm on LinkedIn, Lindsay McAteer. I don't know. You're welcome to share my contact information if you want. But yeah, I'm happy, always happy to help, happy to answer questions, anything like that. Absolutely.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, Lindsay, thank you for being here. Students, thank you all for being here. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I look forward to seeing you at our next workshop. See you, everybody.